Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this month's BOTSOC webinar. I see there's quite a few people dialing in from different places across the country. So really happy that you are all joining us for this evening's webinar. It is titled Bulb Buzz, Uncovering South Africa's Hidden Treasures from Conservation to Cultivation. And that's exactly the focus that we'll take with our lineup of speakers, which I'll introduce to you in a few moments, or in a few minutes rather. But I just want to remind everyone that you are more than welcome to note where you are dialing in from in the chat. And then also a gentle reminder that we'll be doing questions after each speaker has finished their presentation. And you can ask questions also in the Zoom chat that we will direct to our speakers in between the talks. And finally, a kind reminder that our webinars will be available on the BOTSOC YouTube channel after tonight's webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our three speakers for tonight's webinar. We have Dr. or Professor John Manning, a Sandby iridaceae specialist and taxonomist. Thank you, John. We are delighted to have you on the webinar, and we look forward to what you will be sharing with us in terms of those special iridaceae species that we all love so very much. Then our second speaker is Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is coming more from a grower's or a cultivation perspective from Random Harvest Nursery, and Jonathan is dialing in or joining us from Johannesburg. Thank you, Jonathan. We also look forward to your talk a little bit later. And then finally, we have Tristan Kruger. Tristan, I don't know if you can switch on your camera and just wave to us, just to greet everyone in the audience. Thanks. Tristan is a conservationist. He currently works for Sandby's CREW program, so the custodians of wild and endangered wildflowers, and yeah, particularly working a lot also in the Cape Town area. With that, I'm going to be short and brief with my introduction, and I'd like to hand over to John Manning. John, we look forward to what you will share with us tonight, especially touching on some of the new discoveries and publications. And it's just astonishing that we're still discovering new species despite the intense efforts in taxonomy and botany across the country, but also particularly in the Cape Floristic region, which we know is so unique in geophytes and the iridaceae species in particular. So we can switch over to John. We're going to ask him to unmute himself, and we look forward to listen to your talk.
Thanks, Martina.
We are just going to give John a moment to share his screen. Just a moment, please. There you are. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Lovely to be here. I'm going to share with you some of the very recent discoveries in the last 5 years in the iris family. Get this to work. Which is the next slide, Martina?
So you can use your keyboard or
which one?
Yes. No, the other one, the one on the right. Yes. Just click on it.
Okay.
There you are. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Quick summary. The family's obviously been studied here for a long, long time, and it started with the comprehensive treatment for the Flora capensis in 1896. Which obviously was limited in the species that they had access to. And then that, of course, was written in the UK and Kew, and most of the early work was done in Europe. But then once the South African College started here as UCT, we had local botanists working, and they benefited hugely from access to local collectors, interested people, so like equivalent to the CREW people we have now. And that was Joyce Lewis especially, and Miriam de Vos going up into the 1960s and through into the 80s. And then, of course, Peter Goldblatt, my colleague, started working on the family in the 1980s. And so if we just have a look at the number of species that have been recognized over those times, in Baker's time, there were 437 iridaceae in Southern Africa. By the time Peter had started summarizing the work, just about 100 years later, it had doubled up to 917 species. But then in the next third of a century, we added another 300 to it. So it was almost an exponential increase on the number of species. And that really speaks to collecting in the area. And so at the moment, we have 1,210 species of iridaceae, and that was in the revision that we published of the family in 2020. And yet a few have continued to trickle in the last 5 years. And so we have 9 new ones in the last 5 years. And I'm just going to go through those with you so you can get an idea of what they are and how they came about. So we started with this little Geyserizer in July of 2020 by Rian van der Walt. And it's restricted to a small sandstone hill in the Swartland. It's very similar to the more widespread Geyserizer solaris, but has longer, narrower tepals and longer stamens with purple anthers. So there you can see the map. The black dot is where this new Montana comes from, and the white dots are Geyserizer solaris, which we assume is its closest relative. So single sandstone hill in the clay of the Swartland. The second one, and this is a really spectacular thing, Ishmael found it in October 2020. It's the white dot on the left of that little map, mid-slopes of the Vaihoek in the Breda River Valley, and it was after a burn, so an unusual circumstance there. We went up there, a single tiny population, we could find no more plants along those slopes, and it's very, very distinctive species. We're not even sure what it's related to. And again, November 2020, this is in the Swartberg and the Little Karoo. Obviously, that's less botanized. And Jan Vlok discovered this in the mountains above Karlitsdorp. Again, it's a Morea, and its closest relative, we assume, is Algoensis, which is all along the southern coastal mountains. Then we're getting to 2021, December 2021. So now this is midsummer, and Brian Dupree, the Indigofera specialist, was hiking up on the top of the Langeberg, and he came across this very distinctive little Geyserizer. It's similar to another Langeberg species from the Western Langeberg, but there are significant differences. And again, it's known now from that single population, but again, post-fire and very high altitude in midsummer. Then this is a very interesting story. This plant grows right alongside the main hiking trail in Grootwinterhoek. It must have been stepped on, literally stepped on, by thousands of people, if not millions of people. But it's one of these little Galaxia moreas, and they only flower for half a day, and all the flowers in the population flower at once each day, and they don't flower every day. So if you're not there on an on day, you'll see nothing at all. And it started appearing on iNaturalist. September 2022, Alex Rebello posted a picture of it. The next year, Rian van der Walt posted a picture of it. And I went out 3 times to try and find these things. And on 2 of the trips, it was an off day and nothing was flowering. And the 3rd day, we managed to get some plants in flower. So again, it's known from one locality. There are many, many plants, but it's right along a major hiking route. How it's never been found is another of those mysteries. And a very distinctive thing. There are no other pale blue Galaxias like this. Then we're getting more recent, September 2022, also on iNaturalist. People started posting images of this little Hesperantha from the Nieuweveld Mountains above Beaufort West. Not many iridaceae there. So initially we didn't know what it really was until Enti Moorman collected, and with his uncle, I think it is, they collected really, really lovely material of it. And so now we have good material of it. It's known from 2 or 3 populations in that vicinity, but again, in a relatively unexplored area where there are not many iridaceae. Then another iNaturalist posting from Brian Dupree, a single population or single locality, Botmas Kop, which is in the midst of being developed. It's right on the road to Helshoogte and outskirts of Stellenbosch. A very beautiful thing. Again, how did nobody ever come across it? This appeared after pines were cleared from that locality. So it's been there for as long as those pines have been growing, but completely smothered and under this understory. But again, a most wonderful thing. No question that it's very distinctive, but again, it had completely overlooked. People just hadn't been there at the right time, or hadn't known what they were looking at, or hadn't collected it. And again, iNaturalist postings on it. Another of Ishmael's discoveries, we're now in October last year. Single locality at Romans River Farm, again near Wolseley. A very distinctive ixia, again right next to the road. And we know that Mr. Mostert, who owned that farm, was very keen on ixias. There's an ixia named after him. And this plant is right on the main track where he would have been many times, but either it wasn't flowering or he hadn't noticed it. One of those weird things. 3 plants is all we found. And then another of the recent ones, again from iNaturalist, they started posting images of this thing. It's from the Knarsvlakte between Van Reinsdorp and Vredendal. July 2021 images, September 2022. Again, it's right on next to the road, the main road from Van Reinsdorp to Vredendal. Peter and I have been on that road hundreds of times. This thing is very distinctive. Its closest relative looks to be a very rare Morea from the Richtersveld, which is very similar, but this one is very different in many ways. Unique fruits. So again, one of those things, if you're not there when they're flowering and they flower for half a day, you just don't see them, or you pass them by and think, oh, well, that's just another Morea. So to summarize, there are still undescribed and undiscovered irids. All of these 9 new ones are from the greater Cape Floristic region or the very edges of it, which makes sense because the family is best represented here. Most of them are local endemics, often from isolated mountains or remote locations, but literally sometimes from right next door. And finally, all of them are from large or relatively large genera. So we surprisingly haven't seen any new gladiolus, and obviously there are no new ones in the smaller genera, but I bet you there are new Romulias out there and probably new Moreas. So keep looking and keep posting on iNat, and make sure you post very good images of these things so that we have an idea that this is something special. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for sharing those really nice details of some of the finds in the Cape Floristic region, or I should say in the greater Cape Floristic region. It is certainly interesting, and we know that it is the cryptic ones that we are finding, and they're often few in number, as you said, in odd and obvious places. I was going to ask, what would you recommend for normal or amateur botanists out there? But I think you've answered that question by suggesting that people post good quality photographs on iNat. We know that all our South African and also international botanists make use of iNat, so it seems to be a really useful tool. I don't see any questions for John in the chat, but people are more than welcome to still pop questions directly, and we can see if we can answer them. just a call for anyone that would like to ask specific questions about any of those mysterious species that we found. John, it's also interesting to note that there's so many new, young, and upcoming botanists. You mentioned Brian de Prier and also N.T. Moorman, who's quite an active crew volunteer as well. So yeah, I think if you could maybe just guide some of our people on how to take good quality photographs, what would your advice be? Normally one picture wouldn't do it, and then yeah, how would they go about that?
Well, the trick is not so much to teach people how to take photographs, but what to photograph. And this is the problem with irises or iridaceae, the flowers are so fantastic. Everybody just focuses on the flower, and there's usually full face pictures of the flowers. Many of the characters are not there. So if you're seeing plants that you're unfamiliar with, or even if there are things that you're unsure of, take pictures from the side, showing how long the tube is of these things, what the bracts look like. Take pictures of the whole plant so we can see the leaves, even those basic things. So don't just have us a full frontal picture of the front of the flower, because often there are many species that look like that. So we need to see other characters. And we're busy working on a guide at the moment that will help people identify what are the important characters for each of the genera, so that if they go through that, they can say, oh, I need to make sure if I'm going to photograph a Romulea, I've got to show the bracts, and I've got to show this or that. Or if I'm photographing an Aristea, I need to show that. So we're trying to give some guidance on that score. But the bottom line is from the front, from the side, and from the bottom is good.
Good. There you have it, from the front and from the side and from the bottom. We'll do our best, and luckily most of our cell phones should nowadays be able to cover that and hopefully post lots of observations on INET. And yeah, looking forward to see what comes out of people making contributions. I'd also like to, on another note, moving away from iridaceae, there's a new Strelitzia publication out on Heymanthus by D. Sneeman. So if anyone is interested to have a look at that, I believe it's the Strelitzia publication number 48. I glanced over it, and it is really a photographic, display of our beautiful Heymanthus, or the genus Heymanthus. Just to alert people to that publication as well, which I think is a wonderful contribution, and many people might want to take a look at that. So we'll post the link shortly in the chat also for you. So no further questions then for John today. Just a thank you from our side, John, for making yourself available and for sharing insights on those 9 iridaceae species.
Pleasure, Martina. Good luck, everybody.
We're going to move to our second speaker. So our second speaker is Jonathan Taylor. As I've said, Jonathan is dialing in from Johannesburg. Jonathan is here more from a grower's perspective and from the Random Harvest Nursery. So Jonathan, thank you also very much for joining us, and we look forward to what you will share with us in your talk. Let's just give a minute for Jonathan to switch his slides, and then we should be ready.
Yeah, there we go. Good evening, everyone. I've put together a selection of bulbous species from the point of view of a gardener's perspective. So slightly different plants that you might not often see in nurseries or available, but still easy to cultivate and definitely very rewarding. First up, we've got one of the oxalis. Now, unfortunately, oxalis, in terms of a gardening sort of mentality, are often seen as weeds because we get the exotic species from Mexico. But South Africa has such a beautiful collection of oxalis, and they're actually they're very rewarding, easy to grow garden plants and should definitely be used. So the specific one we've got here is Oxalis purpurea. So the name purpurea sounds a bit strange if we look at the photo and we see absolutely pure white flowers, but it's quite a variable species. This is an alba form, pure white. On the left-hand side photo, you can see there's one little flower there that's pinkish. So there's quite a lot of color variation. But we specifically selected this alba form because it's extremely free flowering. And from the moment it starts getting water in sort of late autumn, it will continue flowering right up until even early summer. So as long as it has moisture, this plant will always have flowers. Very well suited to pot culture, as you can see here. They multiply rapidly, but also does equally well in the garden, both in winter rainfall areas and summer rainfall. They are winter rainfall plants, so they're naturally dormant in summer, but they do exceptionally well in summer rainfall as well. And they don't have to be lifted at all. They can actually stay outside. These specific containers stay out and they get rain right throughout the summer months as well. So it's not one of the bulbs that you actually have to lift up. The plant itself grows to about 7 centimeters. And what's interesting, the flowers only open when the sun shines. So at night, they sort of furl closed and they open up again in the morning when the sun hits them. Their natural distribution is as I said, Western Cape. So winter rainfall from Namaqualand all the way down to Port Elizabeth. So it's quite a widespread species. And you'll often notice in areas where there's been a burn or fire, these are one of the first bulbs to reappear, and they add great color to the landscape. It's a lovely plant to use in between stepping stones or between pavers because of its low growth habit and the fact that it flowers so freely. Yeah, and definitely a worthwhile species to have in any garden. Propagation of this, they, as I mentioned, they create offsets very quickly, so one can merely divide the clumps and then split them. They also grow very easily from cuttings. So as soon as the leaves emerge, you can take a cutting of the actual little stem, and very quickly it produces a bulblet, and it will still flower the same season. It's possible to grow them from seed. The only problem with seed growing is that the capsules pop open and it's a bit difficult to collect the seed. But if you are able to collect the seed, they germinate very easily. So they're not difficult at all to propagate. So definitely a very rewarding, easy little bulbous species to grow. Next up, we've got Mariah Cookie, also a winter rainfall species with beautiful yellow flowers. Sorry, went one too quickly. Yeah, yellow flowers. The plant itself, strappy grass-like leaves, grows to about 30 centimeters tall. The leaves themselves are very wispy, and very nondescript, so you don't really see that. But you get these magnificent, large, buttery yellow flowers, and they've actually started flowering now, and they'll flower right throughout winter. So that's a very nice small bulb species to use in containers, to interplant with smaller grass species. They'd get a bit lost if interplanted with larger grasses, but a small species like Erogrostis capensis or Andropogon eucomus or something like that makes a beautiful sort of meadowy feel. So a very handy little bulb for winter color, and also very easy to grow. They can also be left in the ground year-round, and they multiply quickly and form actually large clumps and stands. And the seed grows and germinates exceptionally easily. So one can collect the little brown seeds. You can see on the top right-hand photo, there's a seed pod there. Once that's dried out, one can collect the seed and sow that, and germinates rapidly, and also, yeah, flowers very freely once established. Our next plant that we've got over here is Eucoma zambiziaca. This is an interesting one. It's one of the smallest bulbs in the genus. Other small one is Eucomus van der Merwe. But this specific little Eucomis comes from the Limpopo province, so it's a summer grower. And what makes it really rewarding little plant is its beautiful bright green foliage, and then these bright, cheerful little spikes of yellowish, that turn white flowers. So it's a great container plant. It is winter dormant though, but it's short rest period. The flowers, really make up for that period that it's dormant. So an easy grower, not difficult at all, like sunny conditions, can take light shade, but will flower best. Interesting enough, where it occurs in nature, the soil is very clay. It actually also occurs in Zimbabwe and Malawi further north. But yeah, so a handy bulbous species if one is dealing with a clay soil. And what's also interesting in the zone where it grows, it often gets very foggy and misty, and you can get heavy dew. So yeah, in nature, those sort of extra sources of moisture would add to the plant's sustenance throughout the season. Being a plant that's dormant during winter, this plant can take a fair amount of frost as long as it's well mulched. So in colder areas, they can survive. The top parts will obviously get frosted and they will die down, but the bulbs will survive and they will shoot out again in spring or summer. The flower actually also lasts very well in a vase, so it's a lovely cut flower. So a handy little bulbous species to have in the garden. Propagation can be via splits, as the bulbs do create offshoots, and one can break those off and replant them. Otherwise, it's easily grown from seed. The Eucomises do tend to hybridize quite a lot and quite easily. So if one has other species in the vicinity of this, one must just take note that one could be growing a hybrid if the plant wasn't isolated or if it was cross-pollinated. But yeah, very interesting little bulb, that one. Next, we've got one of the Ornithogalums. So this is its cousin is the Treurnicht, which we all know. Ornithogalum jansifolium naturally occurs in damp grassland. So it's a small species, grows to about 15 centimeters tall, very strappy grass-like leaves. And then it has these beautiful, dainty little white spikes of flowers, very free flowering. And it sort of peaks its flowering in midsummer. So it's a great addition to a sunny grassland type garden. Does very well in containers, and also this one, actually the flowers last very well in a vase, so it makes a very dainty cut flower. Cut back after flowering, they perform best if they prune right down onto the ground, after which they can then resprout. They generally remain evergreen, depending on the climate that you're planting them in. If it's severely cold, they will lose leaves, but generally it's an evergreen bulbous species. They make a beautiful border because of their height, and yeah, very dainty, pretty little white flowers. Frisia grandiflora. Frisia is quite a well-known garden plant, but what makes Frisia grandiflora quite special and versatile is the fact that it can take a fair amount of shade. As I mentioned, it's a woodland species, so it does naturally have to cope with sort of semi-shade to shaded conditions. In full shade, the leaves tend to be a little bit floppy, so they're best suited to morning sun or dappled light throughout the day, where the leaves will grow to about 30, perhaps half a meter tall. And they flower these beautiful red, occasionally pink flowers. Its native sort of growing area, right from Durban in Natal through the northern provinces, and it extends up into Africa all the way to Tanzania. It's a great plant to have once again, in a semi-shaded grassland setting. So if you've got a grassy area and you want some color, Freesia grandiflora is definitely a nice one to add over there. And they're best planted in stands or in clumps because the leaves can be a bit floppy. If they're planted closely together, they tend to keep each other upright and they don't flop around so much. Now, this is an interesting little gladiolus. It's one of the smaller ones, Ochroleucus. Beautiful pink little flowers. The leaves and the plant itself will grow to about 20 centimeters, and then it bears these beautiful spikes of soft pink flowers above that. They also flower at a very nice time of year when not much else flowers. They've just finished their main flowering season now. So it's a very handy little bulb to use. Grows very well in containers. It just needs a well-drained, compost-rich soil and prefers sunny conditions, although can take light shade or semi-shade. Then the last one that we have over here is Albuca showi, which in Afrikaans is called a lanternblom, which is very descriptive of the little flower because it does look like a little lantern hanging. What's interesting about this plant is the leaves have a licorice scent. So if you brush against the leaves or stroke them, you'll get an interesting licorice or almost aniseedy type of smell. The leaves are also very sticky. They've got tiny little sticky hairs on them. And it's a very dark green leaf, quite a spiky leaf that does tend to sort of curl back on the ends. Beautiful nodding little bell-like yellow flowers carried in summer. And it makes a beautiful addition to a meadow garden or a short grassland or very well in a rockery type of setting. Yes, so thank you. There's a few bulbs to inspire and to use in our gardens.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. That really was a beautiful tour of, some of the really delicate and colorful bulbs that I'm sure many of us would like to grow. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but Jonathan, perhaps
we grow a range of plants based, from tiny ground covers up to large trees. About currently our stock list is about 1,200 species. So we really try and have variety available. Our main market is sort of we do a lot of wholesaling, but we always open to the public as well. We always try to have sort of informative displays and try and inspire people to use indigenous plants, not only just for horticultural purposes, but actually also to take things like biodiversity and wildlife gardening into account. So one of our strong sort of focuses is wildlife gardening. I mean, our ethos, our mission is actually to turn Joburg into a shall we say, a game reserve, one garden by a time, by using indigenous species, because as humans encroach and development happens, we're displacing species all the time, and not just plants. All the wildlife that's associated with plants, from tiny insects up to more typical wildlife. But so we try and bring the message of sort of responsible plant choices and indigenous first. So we always try and punt indigenous and its uses. So and education of the uses of plants in different settings. That's quite important to us. So so we are basically an indigenous nursery, but we have a bit more than just, or we look at plants differently. It's not just about the plant. It's about what the plant can actually do to the environment and our role that we can play in saving that.
Nice links to conservation, horticulture, and education.
Yes, basically.
All seems very important in the times that we are living in, and with biodiversity under threat as we as we know and are aware of. So yeah, thank you very much, Jonathan. That was a really insightful talk, and we enjoyed looking at that, especially the plants. And I'd like to encourage our audience to pay Random Harvest Nursery a visit also when they get the chance to pass by. So from Botsok, thank you very much for that nice overview.
Thank you.
Our third speaker for tonight is Tristan Kruger. Tristan, you can switch on your camera and then we can see you. Tristan is very involved and has been very involved working for the CRU program in the Cape Florist region the couple of years. Tristan, how many years have you been with CRU now?
Just over 2 years, but I've been a CRU volunteer for just about 2 more years than that. So about 4 years I've been involved with CRU.
That's it. So thank you. We're going to, Tristan would usually talk about, I think, a conservation perspective, but we had a quick chat before his presentation, and I think he's going to draw on also linking both conservation and horticulture. And he's also a adamant collector, or not collector, but I mean a responsible conservationist and horticulturist that will share some of his, I think, your special love for some of the special ones and the cryptic ones. Thank you, Tristan. We look forward to your talk.
Thank you. Just waiting for Koos just to put up the presentation, and then we can get started. Okay, fantastic. So good evening, everyone. My name is Tristan Kruger, and I am a staff member of the Custodians of Red and Endangered Wildflowers, or simply CRU, based at Kirstenbosch in Cape Town. Most of the work that I do at CRU concerns species recovery, which basically means that I work especially with some of our country's most threatened plant species and identify the means by which we can reduce the risk of extinction. And sometimes this includes active on-the-ground work by myself when the opportunity arises, but to my benefit. Many of these highly threatened species are geophytes, and this affords me the opportunity to tick off many bucket list species, which are mainly from the families Iridaceae and Amaryllidaceae, hence my presentation title, Chasing the Next Fix for Floriferous Bulbs. I'm quite literally addicted to bulbs. And if it's worth mentioning, when I'm out in the field, Ishmael, he knows I haven't seen any interesting bulbs when I'm walking back to the bucky with a very dull and morbid face. So I very much enjoy my bulbs. But why do I love them like very specifically? So, well, just based off my first slide, the variation in this first slide that you guys are seeing, this variation in color and form within one family. I mean, there's 2 families represented here, but this just speaks to the manner in which different species are so perfectly designed to their specific habitats and how they interact with other organisms. These intricacies in how they interact with the environment is a big reason for why they interest me. And additionally, no one can doubt that they are stunning. I mean, not many of our CRU volunteers speak to me after a hike about a beautiful buchu. And buchus are beautiful. There are some that are really, really pretty. But oftentimes people are raving about a gladiolus, a Babiano, and Ixia species. And because I'm a trained horticulturist, I find them incredibly rewarding, or I find it very rewarding to grow bulbs. I mean, some species like Glycyrrhiza radians can even flower in their second year from seed. Although there are some large amaryllids that may take much, much longer. If we can just get the next slide, please, Koos. Thank you. So, as mentioned before, I work for CRU, and I just wanted to give some context for those of you that might not know about CRU. So we are a jointly implemented program by the Botanical Society and SANBI in 2003. We are a national program consisting of citizen scientists coordinated by staff members like myself and Ishmael to monitor and conserve threatened plant species in South Africa. And now, after 20 years of monitoring threatened species, we are involved in active species recovery. And then also, why do we monitor and conserve? Well, South Africa has over 20,000 plant species, with 13% of these that are threatened with extinction, and 11% which are considered near threatened, data efficient, or rare endemics. This, if you crunch the numbers, means that 1 in 4 plants in South Africa are rare or threatened. Next slide, please, Koos. Cool. So one of the best ways to enjoy the great diversity of Cape bulbs, I'm speaking from a very Cape perspective, understandably. Well, there's a big focus on iridaceae, especially in the Cape in the spring season. And I just wanted to share some of the flower hunting places that might be worth visiting in the Cape, especially when I see some of the prettier Cape irids. So as crew, we conduct a lot of field work in the field, and ultimately this is the best place to experience our country's unique flora, not to mention some of these stunning geophytes as I've mentioned. As such, I thought it might be a good time, although maybe a bit premature, to start getting excited about the spring season that lies ahead, seeing that we are finally in the cold grip of spring, and bulbs can start getting happy that there's enough water. With this in mind, I've highlighted 3 publicly accessible sites that I highly recommend for bulb enthusiasts in the Cape, and for those that might be visiting, and especially those that might be interested in the family iridaceae. Next slide, please, Koos. Okay, firstly, we'll start with Wayland's Wildflower Reserve. Situated just south of Darling, and is open to the public from about August to September. This special place is very close to my heart because I've been visiting it with my parents and grandparents since I was a child. And in fact, my grandparents were from the Darling area, so visiting Wayland's became a yearly pilgrimage because they also loved the wildflowers of the area. So these bulb species that are just represented here form part of a group of plants called, of bulbs called the wine cups. Although I've not included one, Geyserrhiza Matthewsii, which is, I think, critically endangered. It's it's quite threatened, and which I'm also yet to photograph. And also this group of plants, I mean, almost single-handedly is responsible for my love of the family iridaceae, having visited there as a child many times. Otherwise, there are still many other geophytes of the genus Babiana, Morea, Gladiolus, Ixia, Lacinalia, and that are well worth going to see out at Wayland's. Next slide, please. Cool. And then secondly, I've got Jacobsbaai. Well, it's a very special place full of many endemics to the Vredenburg Peninsula. The Wildflower Reserve is just south of town. If we can call it a town, it's more of a holiday town. And has several rare endemics that can very easily be seen in peak spring, although from late winter, there are already some endemic bulbs and flower that I have not included here. Next slide, please, Koos. Thirdly and lastly is the Upper Breda Valley area around Tulbagh that I've been wanting, well, personally I've been wanting to see for many years. But last year I had the opportunity, and here the Tulbagh Municipal Reserve just outside of town is easily accessible to the public and has some of the best displays of vibrant, and vibrant is quite an understatement, scarlet Babiana villosa and Geyserrhiza erosa. This area is also known for its vibrant, like the entire valley is known for its red, pinks, and purple species, and is worth a mid-September visit as several of the species occur here and nowhere else. Next slide, please, Koos. Cool. So as I've mentioned before, a lot of my work at Crew involves species recovery and allows me to work with some of the country's rarest bulb species, some of them pictured here. I found only in one place in the entire world and are extremely at risk of going extinct. So just one of these two species, or one of the two species that I'd like to highlight here is Morea lopschrei in the top left. The species occurs on private land on a kopje in Langebaan, where we estimate less than 10 mature plants are in existence. And because of my natural bias for bulbs, I went back to this population 2 years ago to collect seed from the 7 marked plants that we found that spring season. And only 4 of these produced viable seed, which was given to Kirstenbosch, the Millennium Seed Bank Partnership at Kirstenbosch, and Stellenbosch University Botanical Gardens. Thankfully, the species is in cultivation and has been in cultivation since about the 1980s when the material was made available from Kirstenbosch, and has been so for some time in private collections of bulb enthusiasts around the world, and will continue to survive in cultivation with certainty should the wild population crash. Because as you would understand, seven individuals, that's a very, for those that understand genetics, that's a very small gene pool, and there's a high chance of genetic inbreeding, genetic inbreeding. Another species that I just want to highlight here is Ixia vinacea in the middle block, the beautiful pink job. So this species is literally teetering on the edge of the man-made trench, where 80% of the plants at real risk of erosion washing them away. This species has been banked over consecutive years by the Kruger team with the Millennium Seed Bank, and just recently material has been shared with Stellenbosch University Botanical Gardens to establish a living collection. Next slide, please. Thank you. Another species worth mentioning, very exciting, that was rediscovered by my colleague Afi Sonda and myself as part of some crew work that we were doing last year, is Babiana foliosa. The species has not been seen since its collection in 1951 and was found by myself and Hafiz in the Overberg, growing in a gum plantation riddled with black wattle just outside of a local cemetery. The population is likely no more than 20 genetically distinct individuals, and will likely become another species of high priority for species recovery. Next slide, please. Oh, this is not the right presentation. If you can just go again, Koos. And again. There we go. Back to the one with the previous one. There we go. Oh, the one that says ex situ collections. There we go. Ex situ collections, grand. Sorry for that technical business. I'm actually presenting, speaking from my cell phone, so I'm kind of just relying on tech support to run through my presentation. So just getting back to the work that I was talking about regarding ex situ collections. So some of my species recovery work includes this hands-on on the ground work that needs to be done, because often crew are the only people or group of people able to access these plants, and as such, I quite often find myself opportunistically and sometimes guided by my bulb bias, going to collect seeds of many of these threatened bulb species. So this is referred to as ex situ conservation, which basically means taking wild plant material, which can be plants, seeds, or cuttings, so that a genetically diverse collection can be established in a man-made facility like botanical gardens or the Millennium Seed Bank Partnership. The function for these ex situ conservation collections is to serve as an insurance policy should wild populations be destroyed for whatever reason that may be. They also serve as reservoirs for bolstering wild populations, establishing new populations at suitable sites. Additionally, they serve the function of providing material for research and education. You can just go next slide, please, Koos. I'll just let you know if when you need to stop. Okay, no, that's cool. That's where we need to be. Yeah. Just go back, please. Just two more, I think. Next one. There we go. Okay. So, I mean, there was that whole list of collections that were made on the previous slide, and now you just need to ask yourself, well, where does this material go? So obviously, as a responsible conservationist, that would not stay with me. They actually end up going to our conservation partners. So next slide, Koos, please. Grand. Okay. So one of these, previous one, please. There we go. One of these conservation partners who, so just the slide with the plants that are in pots and stuff. There we go. Okay, I'm going to carry on. So one of these partners is Stellenbosch University Botanical Gardens that I work quite closely with. So they meticulously curate and maintain the ex situ conservation collections that I bring to them, and they maintain them as either living collections, or they maintain them as living collections or simply living plants that can be used as an insurance policy, education, or research. One example for research is Oxalis laevis in the top right, which has been included in the Oxalis research collection at the garden, which the botany department at the university regularly conducts research on. Also, the collections at Stellenbosch University Botanical Gardens are open to the public. And I believe, at least, that when a threatened species is mature in flowers, then it brings the plants directly into the public eye, which allows people to truly appreciate our unique flora, Cape flora, and perhaps even prompt them to get more involved in conservation, as opposed to plants being out of sight or access to the being out of sight or being out of access to the public, or just growing in the wild. And so people are a little bit detached and would have very little attachment to those plants, as opposed to seeing them out in a botanical garden and actually wanting to get involved in some sort of conservation work. Next slide, please, Chris. Cool. So just going to touch quickly on the cultivation of bulbs based on a little bit on the 11 years of experience I have cultivating several species of Iridaceae and Amaryllidaceae. The reason I believe in an understanding of cultivation as an important skill is because, as a hort, I have been told that we cannot truly understand a plant until we grow it. Also, there are many threatened species sitting in private collections, and I believe that it is very important that I share some of the things I have learned, and perhaps someone may learn something beneficial that may contribute towards the conservation of our threatened indigenous bulb species. And I don't claim to be an expert in this regard, but we'll just be sharing some of these things that I have learned over the last few years. Next slide. Okay, so firstly, we have the choice of container. So I'm really just going to go through the basics here, but I think these are so vital to understand if you want to grow plants. So this is mainly for potted plant culture. It just makes things a whole lot easier for cultivation. So I'm just going to go through some of the components for that. So the first consideration for what container you would be planting your bulbs in is the eventual mature dimensions of the plant in question. So this ultimately decides the size of your pot. For example, in the top left, I've got a Babiana potted in a deep blueberry pot that accommodates the corms and the extensive root systems. It's also worth mentioning that even in these pots, my Babiana species often grow through the drainage holes of these pots. I'm referring to the roots, not the corms here, which just shows how vigorous they are. In contrast, Morea galaxia is planted in a standard, at the bottom, is planted in a 12 centimeter square pot because dimensions are small and has far less of an extensive root system. And then the next point, flowering time. Yeah, I consider species that flower later in the spring, like some Ixias, and therefore they have an extended growing season. For this reason, I put them in a blueberry pot too, because the volume of the soil buffers the rate of water loss and air temperature better than a smaller pot. Therefore, plants are more comfortable as temperatures warm up. And if I forget, because it happens, forget to water them in the springtime as things warm up, then it's very unlikely that they're going to dry out. And it kind of gives me a little bit of leeway, and the fact that they won't dry out and go entirely dormant. Yeah, anyway. And then perennial roots, that's also something to consider for amaryllids when selecting pots. So some of the amaryllids, like stromerias, produce new roots annually, if I'm not mistaken, and don't have perennial roots, so you don't really need to consider them in this for this particular point. But basically, a clay pot is great for amaryllids with perennial roots because they want that gaseous exchange between the soil and the atmosphere. It's live roots. They're gonna be growing throughout the year, and that just means that they're respiring and they need oxygen. So clay pots are porous. The air can move from the atmosphere into the soil. And then very obviously seeds or adult plants. So you're obviously going to select a smaller pot for seeds, and I don't grow commercially. So I mean, I'm just going to be growing them in these tiny little pots on the top right hand side, and then basically adult pots. I put them in according to the above points that I've just mentioned. Next slide, please. Cool. So soil media. So my one standing rule that I have is inorganic soil mediums work best. That's just not, I mean, it's not a long time that I've been growing plants, but or bulbs, but it's just my personal preference. Also, I tend to go for the more budget approach. So I go for river sand, and here in Cape Town, at least, you can't get really good river sand, or not washed river sand. So I end up actually buying river sand and putting it in a pillowcase and putting that in a vat of water and agitating it to get all the clay particles out, and then it drains very well. But then alternatively, you've got things like akadama, and pumice. Akadama is basically a Japanese product used for bonsai. It's a partially fired clay particle, and it holds its shape, but it's quite soft still. So for that reason, I would often opt for like crushed brick or weathered granite or shale, which is on the right hand side, the weathered shale. So I consider those to be like really hard forms of akadama that still hold onto nutrients pretty well and drain very well, especially if they are graded. So that's just pretty much my next point. So grading, meaning that you're kind of separating the sizes of your particles. So a good sieve comes in handy, because then you're just going to have uniform drainage and you're not going to have these dry pockets in the pot. And then the known species habitat of that particular species will often determine the soil medium used. So if I know something's from a renosterveld, I'll often use something that's a little bit more nutrient rich, like the weathered shale, as opposed to using maybe this sandier mix for something like the Babiana tubiflora, which is from sand habitats. Next slide, please. And then just collection maintenance. So watering and fertilizing considerations. So obviously seedlings versus adult plants. You're going to be watering less. You're going to be watering your seedlings more, especially in my case, because I got them in small pots, and then those are just going to dry out faster. That's pretty obvious. And then flowering time. So that's also something that's important. So as I mentioned, I've got like things like ixias that if I have a flower late in the season, and basically I want to be watering them up until that point that they are finished flowering and starting to set seed. And then winter versus summer rainfall. This is something that we don't often have to talk about in the Cape, because a lot of people that grow bulbs in the Cape tend to grow winter rainfall things, because it just makes things easier, because we've got the rain that will irrigate our pots right through the winter, and there's almost no need to water except for in the springtime as the season progresses. And then inorganic versus organic fertilizers. So I always prefer organic fertilizers, because well, you're not going to burn your plants. There's very low chance of burning your plants. I don't even think you can, but inorganics do tend to burn your plants, because they're basically salts. But Hideko actually has a really good plant food or bulb food that's slow release, which is quite good, that I've tried out. And then pest and disease management. I'm referring to that as an integrated response. So healthy plants, happy plants. Healthy plants are happy plants. So keep them happy, they will stay healthy. Give them the nutrients they need, give them the right pot they need, give them the right soil and nutrients they need, watering, all that kind of thing. They're not stressed out. They're not going to be as affected by things like mealybug there on the left, because my nerines over there have not been repotted in ages. They haven't been refreshed. And they're quite nutrient deficient, actually. So that's why those mealybugs have gone for them. And then avoid reusing soils if you can. Like, this is something I must reiterate. I know of people in the community that have lost really important collections because soil has been contaminated with soil-borne diseases, and obviously because a bulb, and I'm referring to bulbs in the broad sense, are typically have storage organs underground, so they're going to be in contact with the ground and any soil pathogens all the time. So, like, use fresh stuff if you can, fresh mediums when you're repotting, and then spot treat when necessary. So, like those mealybugs, I'm just going to squash with my hand, and if I had a bigger collection, I'd probably use chemical, but I try to use this or avoid chemical as much as possible. Next slide, please. Okay, so just general maintenance for bulbs. So repotting. So Well, consider the family of plants that you're dealing with when they're actively growing. What's very obvious is irids are definitely not going to be, especially winter growing irids, are not going to be happy with you doing anything to them while they are actively growing. That's in the winter time and through the spring. They're pretty much going to go prematurely dormant and stop growing and go dormant. And then you kind of lost the season, and you could potentially kill your plants if you do that too early. And then overcrowded pots obviously need to be separated. Overcrowded pots basically lead to these very mashed up root systems, and also the plants use water much faster. So they tend to dry up quite quickly, and then it's quite a mission to actually get that entire pot sufficiently hydrated. So you end up sort of soaking them in water so that the whole pot can get wet. And then refreshed soil medium. So I spoke about that narine that has been repotted in a while. The proof is in the pie there. Hasn't been repotted in a while. It's unhappy. It's unhealthy. It needs a repot with some fresh soil medium. And then the succession of your collection. I think that's very important also, especially if you've got some really important material, or you just want to keep your material going so that you don't have to buy anything again. Hand pollinate to get more seeds. It just makes sense. And obviously you need at least two distinct individuals, genetically distinct individuals to do this with most of the irids, if I'm not mistaken, because I think things like glads, they're self-sterile. They can't self-pollinate. So you'd need at least just two genetically distinct individuals to do that. And then if you've got, again, very important material, exclude pollinators where you can, because you don't want any hybrids that are getting created. I mean, Jonathan was speaking about that eucamus that hybridizes so easily. Babianas are just as promiscuous, and so are some of the Geisserizers. And then share extra material. It just makes sense also to do that, because if you're going to be giving it to some enthusiasts around you and you happen to lose your collection, you've always had a backup that you can go to in your friend that you've shared with. It just makes sense. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mean, we're speaking about cultivation, conservation, but I need to reiterate that, I mean, we're working a lot with the poaching plant crisis, and I need to say that there's no need to poach absolutely anything in the Cape, because there are many ethical means of acquiring material for your collection. And then just in the next slide, Koos, if you don't mind, I've just supplied some really good examples of places, and I mean, most people know about them, Sylvial Seeds and Books. So they've been with Rod and Rachel Saunders, they've been supplying material for years. And I mean, still now I think you can still get rare things like even Gladiolus aureus, which is pretty much the most endangered plant in the country. And you can get it off Sylvial Seeds and Books on their website, and they're relatively cheap. A lot of my material has actually been grown from there. And then obviously you can also get in touch with people that are really enthusiastic about bulbs, so like the Indigenous Bulb Association of South Africa. If I'm not mistaken, they meet on every second last Saturday of the month. And they do their talks down in Pinelands. You can just check out Facebook. That's a good place to check out where they are. And then also a very good way to even just get some really nice adult material is from Fulton Fynbos. So they often supply a lot of the commercial nurseries here in the Cape with dry packed dormant bulbs from late summer till about autumn, and you can buy these guys also relatively cheap. You get about seven, like just looking at the Maria Velosa there, you can get 7 bulbs. There you have an instant Maria Velosa.
Tristan, your sound disappeared for a moment.
Oh, did it disappear for a moment? Where did it disappear, Madeleine?
Just your last sentence.
My last sentence. So I was just saying, what was I saying? I was saying that there's no excuse to be poaching. There is material that's been in cultivation for a very long time, and it's very easy to get it. And just for those that are growing bulbs, keep doing the good work. And for those that are in the field, like our crew volunteers, keep doing the good work. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tristan. That was a lovely integration of conservation and horticulture. And I'm sure people got so many tips out of that presentation for, how to grow some of these species at home for the long term, but also how to make a real contribution to biodiversity conservation of our special bulb species that are often so sought after for our own gardens. And have we passed that window, or how can she possibly go about it? Perhaps we can give Tristan a chance, and then Jonathan, if you have any thoughts, then you can add to that.
So my opinion is, for as long as temperatures are low at night, you can and moisture levels are up, you're good to grow them. I mean, I've still got quite a bit of seed that I need to sow at home from stuff that I've been reproducing from my material, my adult material. So it's not too late. I think last year I even sowed as late as July, and I still got healthy baby corms. But obviously, with those 1-year-old corms, you kind of don't want to take them out of whatever soil medium you've got them growing in. You kind of want to leave them as is, especially if they're in a pot, and then just wait until after the second year of growth to actually remove them from the pot to pot out.
Might be different Cape perspective versus a summer rainfall region. I don't know, Jonathan, if you would like to add anything, or a different perspective. Yeah, welcome to.
Definitely true what you're saying, Martina. The most important thing is to take into account where the plant naturally occurs. So if the plant naturally occurs in a winter rainfall area, now's the time to plant it. If it were a summer rainfall species, now would not be the right time to plant it. Then you'll plant it in spring. So no, winter rainfall species can definitely still be sown now.
So Gerda, your question would relate especially to where you are from, just to point that out especially, but thank you for both adding on to that. Then there's also a question from Gianpaolo, and that's more for Tristan, but Gianpaolo is asking, what about the option of using controlled release fertilizers? I guess you touched on that somewhere towards the end of your presentation.
Yeah, with slow release fertilizers, I think that's always great. So I spoke about a product I came across. It's produced by Adeko, so they're not commercial, but yeah, they're in the commercial sector. So they produce a ton of ornamental bulbs, and they've got this product called, I think, Bulb Food, Adeko Bulb Food, and it's this powder and it's slow release, and I've had really good success with it, so can't complain.
Anything you'd like to add, Jonathan?
We actually make use of Osmocote quite a lot, and it's a slow release, controlled release fertilizer, and you get them in different release periods. So depending on the nature of the plant, you can get a 3-month, a 6-month, a 12-month. So depending what you're trying to achieve in your feeding program. Osmocote is quite expensive, but it's an excellent product. The only thing that one has to remember when you're working with that, it's not something that you can sprinkle on top because it's temperature sensitive. So if it overheats, it can release too much at a certain period. So it has to be mixed into the soil when you're repotting, but it's an excellent feed. So, and what's nice about that is, I mean, if you take a long spectrum one, say a 12-month, your plant is fed for 12 months. You don't have to worry about that ever again. The only drawback is, as I say, you cannot just sprinkle it on top of the plant. And, some plants don't like their roots to be disturbed too much. So you might not want to repot them. But for those species that can manage that, that's an excellent way of feeding. Works very well.
Oh, great. Thanks for that, that input and that advice also. I'm sure it's going to be very useful for people. Maybe a last question before we sign off for the night. And you can, I guess it's both more for Tristan, but also for Jonathan potentially. Do the nurseries or the suppliers you mentioned, Tristan, sell wholesale to landscapers as well? Or are those sources mostly for hobbyists?
Okay, so I can answer that. So when I was still working at a wine estate that will not be mentioned, we not for bad reason, but just because don't want to. We actually ordered in bulk bulb species from Falcon Fambos that I mentioned. So Falcon Fambos offers those mature bulbs, dry packed, and we actually bought quite a lot of bulbs from them, and I mean, basically in bulk. So if a landscaper is interested in, especially Fulton fynbos, those winter rainfall species, then it's very well worth actually contacting them and finding out their quantities available. I think they even do them in plugs, which I found quite funny. But yeah, you can definitely get them. That's for sure, especially here in Cape Town and surrounds.
Excellent. Thank you so much to both Tristan and Jonathan, and John Manning, of course. John had to leave us a little bit earlier, but we are really thankful for your time and the knowledge and insights that you've shared with us. I'm sure it's going to excite people in terms of their growing and what they are able to achieve at home for many of these bulb species. So just to thank all our audience also, we've had good participation during the webinar. Thank you also for the questions. Just a gentle reminder that our webinar will be available on our BOTSOC YouTube channel for anyone that would like to recap or review some of the advice or knowledge that was shared. And our next BOTSOC webinar will again be at the same time in June on the last Thursday of the month. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone, and see you in the field also, hopefully not in a box next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.